Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And certainly for those of you who are joining us in person, good to see you. Somewhat of a new experience. It's been a while, but certainly thankful to be here. But thank you for joining us. Our 5th annual Global Summit on Kidney Disease. If not us, who? If not now, when? Hosted by the American Association of Kidney Patients in partnership with our allies, the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Services. Dr. Raj, it's fantastic to see you, along with everyone else. We greatly appreciate the opening to this session today from our good friend, Dean Bass. We really appreciate that. My name is Richard Knight, and I'm the immediate past president of the American Association of Kidney Patients. And I'm a 23-year kidney patient. Like so many of you listening in the audience and around the world, my journey into kidney disease, it's a familiar one, and that I, along with 32% of the patients on dialysis, crashed into kidney failure, somewhat by surprise, because I was under the care of a primary care physician at the time. I spent a few interesting years, and I do say interesting because the first response is, why me? And then I looked up and said, why not me? When I learned of the numbers. And after doing the research and finding out after the fact, after I was on dialysis, that I was not given the option of home dialysis at the time and was not very well educated on any of the other modalities, particularly because I crashed into dialysis. I was fortunate enough, as I was exploring options, I was fortunate enough to receive a kidney from a living donor. Very thankful for her for doing that. And as I later look back and reflect, it was through a process of educating. She was a fellow board member at a Chamber of Commerce I used to participate on. And I'm just so thankful that she did something that really changed my life, and that was over 16 years ago. Professionally speaking, I'm a college professor, but I also still maintain and spend time working and engaging with many companies, pharmaceutical companies, other firms, healthcare organizations, helping them developing tools to design and to leverage patient input and preferences in their care and quality measures. You know, while I serve as that instructor out of Bowie State, I've also had the privilege of working on Capitol Hill as a U.S. congressional aide and a legislative director, where I had the opportunity to serve as the liaison to the Congressional Black Caucus. My training in business, innovation, public policy, and understanding the concept of strategy has been invaluable to me as I make a contribution to AAKP, to our national and global policy and research policy advocacy efforts. Being part of AAKP since 2008, that's allowed me to access the information, educational resources that I needed to improve my quality of life as a patient, and a platform, very important, as a platform so that I could voice and share my experience in a meaningful way, to demand, and patients have to demand, more innovation, more choices for myself and others who are being diagnosed with kidney disease, as well as those yet to be diagnosed. And what we're doing here today is a result of our collective efforts through AAKP, a group of patients getting together and not accepting the status quo. Through AAKP, I've had the opportunity to serve in a variety of patient advisory roles. Just to name a few, working with the National Institute of Health's Kidney Precision Medicine Project, the Scientific Registry of Transplant Recipients, co-chair of numerous technical evaluation panels for the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and more recently, as a member of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases COVID-19 Treatment Guidelines Panel. As an AAKP member and as a global AAKP partner, I want to emphasize that my fellow patients who are out there listening, you can be just as involved. In fact, it is critical now that we patient consumers, that we raise our voice and support one another across the globe as we demand new diagnostic devices, biologics. We are strong partners for private sector investors and companies with the courage to invest and pioneer new kidney innovations. And once advancements are made, patients are best at being able to drive care choice across so that patients can receive the best therapeutics when they need them. And we've also been involved with all stakeholders in the arenas. It's nice that we have access to different innovations, but as we find out so often, can we get them paid for? So we're also engaged with health insurance companies in terms of expressing the need and making the case on behalf of patients. In 2019, AAKP announced two major initiatives, the AAKP Global and the Decade of the Kidney. AAKP is engaged internationally because we are committed to educating patients and leaders across the globe of the importance of kidney disease prevention, new innovations in treatment, and the necessity to save more lives. We believe that a united patient voice can drive innovation and policy decisions that determine timely regulation and payment and safe care treatments. In fact, you heard from my colleague, J.O. Fokko, this morning out of Africa. We actually serve on a committee together. Patients he is from Africa, some from Malaysia, India, other parts of the world, along with the other activities that Paul Conway elaborated on this morning. So we are very, very much engaged in the arena here locally and on a global front. So as you hear in the next panel, AAKP has been working with the patients, the medical professionals, researchers, and the medical industry allies to advance the consortium led by patients. We've done that to address the unmet needs of this global community. AAKP believes that the international consortium can advance innovation and change kidney care here in the U.S. and in countries where healthcare systems or infrastructure do not support patient consumer choice or access to all treatments. So it is my honor to moderate our session titled Pathways to Artificial Implantable Kidney Organs, Growing Global Momentum. Today's panel includes a mix of in-person and remote presenters, which I'll introduce as they present. Our first speaker is a good friend and ally of AAKP, Dr. Murray Sheldon. Dr. Sheldon is the Associate Director for Technology and Innovation at the Food and Drug Administration. He oversees the center's initiative to proactively facilitate medical device innovation, to address unmet public health needs, and to align what is traditionally done at the FDA with what is required to support the U.S. medical device ecosystem. Dr. Sheldon is a strong patient advocate And I welcome you to the podium, Dr. Sheldon.
Thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate it and honored to be here with some of the best minds I've ever met in my career. It's been a long time, and it's been quite exciting for me to see the changes that you've been able to create, and I hope that it just keeps going until everybody's well and we fix this whole problem. Do you have my slides? Yeah, good. So can we turn on the next slide, please? Great. So we learned from Fokko and earlier on that the emphasis on dialysis started with Dr. Willem Kalf in the Netherlands. Started in 1943, managed a success by 1945. That wasn't a great success, but did the best they could. And they had some rudimentary things in the middle of World War II. But still, we had a good start, and that's what's gotten us this far. And if you fast forward a little bit, in March of 2012, the American Society of Nephrology, ASN, expressed concern to the FDA regarding certain stagnancy in product development relating to kidney health. The ASN recognized there was a particular lack of innovation in different types of technologies, with only 4 new drugs being developed since 2007, and a persistent 5-year survival rate of kidney failure that was worse than most cancers. That was in March, and as they started to talk between FDA and ASN, eventually in September, we created the Kidney Health Initiative, KHI, as a public-private partnership with a memorandum of understanding between the two groups, but it was created with a goal of promoting innovation and patient safety for kidney diseases. Its mission was to catalyze and to move things forward for patient care, effectiveness, and patient safety. Next slide, please. And KHI has really risen to being an extremely important group, so much so that in 2016, the White House engaged with AAKP through KHI to get involved in a summit on organ transplants, recognizing that we weren't taking advantage of everything that was possible, not enough patients were getting transplants, and maybe there's other things that we could do. KHI and AAKP responded with a commitment to develop a roadmap to help direct innovative renal replacement therapy. This was published as a little booklet, 2018, kind of giving instructions to developers on how to get from here to there and how to avoid pitfalls along the way. And that's proven to be very, very effective, and was eventually linked up to the KidneyX organization, which was a funding mechanism to help entrepreneurs get the funds needed to follow that roadmap from here to there. And I think it's done quite a bit. Zach will tell us probably a little more about it. I know he's been engaged in that aspect for quite a while. Next slide, please. But when you think about the different issues that go on in kidney failure, there's a lot of things that we could be thinking about. I mean, why are we spending so much time on kidney failure and renal replacement therapy when we might spend more time on vascular access or on other things that patients deserve. And the survey was done the following year in 2018, asking nearly 1,000 patients, what is it that you want to see happen in your life? And I was surprised when I first saw this because I didn't realize how sophisticated kidney patients are. This was in 2018, but that number on the top, 72%, it really makes all the others small by comparison. They want next generation kidney replacement therapies and artificial kidneys. They wanted that for a while. And I think it's about time we start listening to the patients a little more than we had in the past. The next slide, please. And that led the following year, 2019, to a presidential executive order that President Trump at that time put out. And amongst all the aspects of it to improve kidney health, Section 6 specifically called out development of artificial kidneys, and that the agencies under HHS, like the FDA and CMS and others, would help to support the development of those products as they come through. We would encourage that, and I think that really shows quite a lot of leadership and listening to the patients, because I think that's where you really end up doing the right thing. Next slide. But when you look at this in a larger picture, it's not just the United States. We saw that early on. Well, we've known it for a long time, but we hadn't really focused on it. But this is really an international problem. People all over the world have these issues, and there's activities that are going on. And it turns out that chronic renal disease is turned into end-stage renal disease fairly rapidly in countries with emerging economies. Because as you develop emerging economies, you see more high blood pressure, you see more diabetes, and then you see more kidney disease, and then kidney failure. Next button. But we were also aware that there are potential solutions, that they existed, though, in silos around the world. We medical developers, sometimes we like to hold our little secrets to ourselves and not share them. And that's what happens. Sometimes they're in silos, but there are ways to break through the silos. And the goal is what Fokko mentioned even this morning, is to bundle the best brains and diverse minds in areas of expertise from all around the world within a consortium. And that's where the idea really came from, to develop an international consortium. Next button. And this last point is most important. This consortium has to be patient-led all along. We have to listen to what the patients need and what they want and what they're saying, and they are the best advocates. No company, companies can make all sorts of things. People, doctors, developers, they listen to what the patients need, or at least they should, and they're learning to do that just a little bit more. And we noticed that the initial effort that we had was to link the US and the EU, because they had been thinking about the same thing as the initial base of the consortium. Next slide, please. And when you look at this, this slide, it's interesting because we know ESKD is a worldwide issue, and if you look at the colors and numbers, you'll notice that both in the United States as well as Europe, from 2000 to 2013, that the percentage of people in those countries on dialysis has been dropping. Well, that's not because there are fewer. It's because there are increasing much more rapidly in other parts of the country. You can see with the big red circle, from 34% to 56% in other places. And those are the countries that are developing emerging economies. And so if we think we have some problems and Europe has some problems, we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg. The whole world has its problems. And we believe that there are ways to get countries to work together, to get out of the silos, to help to support the development either with local expertise, or money certainly helps. And the countries that want to join, all the better. They'll have for their patients access to all of these products. Hopefully that will be developed. Next slide, please. And while we know that there's issues around the world, CKD was not really on the top list of people looking at the issues of early death from non-communicable diseases. In 2016, it was number 16. Yeah, 2016, number 16. But the International Society of Nephrology is estimating that's going to rise, just for all of these same reasons that I tried to put together in the talk so you can understand, you know, I'm not just pulling out of my head, it kind of makes sense. But if you take it one step further, and what they've said, by 2030, 14.5 million people around the world will have end-stage kidney disease. That's a lot. Yet only 5.4 million will be treated due to the reasons that are listed. And additionally, more than 2 million will die every year with nothing, no treatment whatsoever. And I think we can do a heck of a lot better than that. Next slide. And on top of it, we run into the ecological aspects of increasing end-stage kidney disease, and what sort of resources are we using? So this is a slide that Fokko had created, and if you take the plastic tubing that we use in dialysis for one patient in 1 year, and you tie them all together, it'll go around the distance between the Earth and the Moon 4.5 times. Just for one patient, just from 1 year. And that's a lot of plastic. Next slide. And that's not to mention what I think is going to make the absence of oil seem pretty trivial, because I think a bigger problem is going to be the absence of good, clean water. Water to drink, water to plant, water for animals to grow. And you better believe how much pure, ultra-pure water is used in dialysis. So, you know, continuing along the same path is not really in our best interest. Things are going to need to change. Next slide, please. But fortunately, there are activities that are going on. Here's a quick list of 24 groups around the world that are actively working in various fields. You can see the various countries. I tossed in number 23 and 24 on xenotransplants that are just a couple of months old. And hopefully we'll have more and more to add to this, but the groups are rarely working together. What would happen if we took everybody who was working on all of these parts and put them in a room and kind of lock the door and say, get to work. Come out when you have something. And maybe it wouldn't be in Paris or a nice place, you know. I think that would be a good way to do it, and that's what the consortium could actually conceive of. Next slide. And what have we actually done? Let's go slowly on this one. This is some of the activities that we've seen that are actually working. The portable peritoneal we call it the WAC, Wearable Artificial Kidney. It's out of Singapore. The one below is another artificial kidney out of UCLA. The one on the top, Shuvo would recognize, that's his IRAD, an implantable bioengineered kidney that takes cells as well as mechanical filtration, puts them together. Another group is working on decellularizing and then recellularizing animal kidneys as scaffolds. And there are groups mostly in Australia and other places that are developing vascularized kidney organoids. And man, when you look at it under the microscope, they look real. And they all have great potential. So this is just the start, and I didn't put on this slide, I did add on the others, the new xenotransplants. We're just scratching the surface, but we'll be adding more and more. Next slide. So, you know, what is our vision? What is it that we're really trying to do to develop an artificial implantable kidney? Next slide. Is to create an international consortium to provide people around the world as a global humanitarian effort for equity, equality, justice, and human rights to the international kidney community, to everybody. You know, this is the problem that you got to fix. Next slide. And there's a few points that we have in our vision that nations can contribute their scientific bioengineering experience or just plain money to the effort. And it's for people who have end-stage kidney failure who cannot otherwise obtain a human kidney for transplant or even dialysis treatment, as we'll see more in the future. And perhaps to build these in advanced manufacturing facilities all around the world that'll create hundreds and thousands of new jobs and new stimulation to really move other aspects of manufacturing forward. And believe it or not, this is a principle that I kind of insisted on, distributed free of charge around the world by patient-led or other international humanitarian organizations. You say, give it free, how do you do that? Well, we have some examples I'll mention in a minute. And we think that in talking to Dr. Andrew Lowe at MIT, and as you saw earlier today, it can be paid for by significant returns on society and investments, not only in development of the products, but as people get well, go back to work, they become productive members of societies. Actually, they earn money and pay taxes. Well, that's a nice thing. And so we think that by developing this type of international collaboration through the consortium, there's an opportunity. Next slide, please. And here's one of the models that I wanted to mention, PEPFAR. This was started by President Bush, related to AIDS. And we had a pretty big AIDS epidemic. We still have some. But through this program, where people all around the world were given antiretrovirus treatment free of charge on a science-based mechanism, it saved 25 million lives, they estimated, helped stabilize nations, and ultimately changed the entire course of the HIV pandemic. It's amazing, the numbers as of 2021. I didn't know the numbers when I looked this up. 28.7 million people are accessing life-saving treatment. New HIV infections have been reduced by 54% through this program alone. And it's very similar. We saw some of this actually with COVID-19, where countries would distribute free of charge to other countries around the world vaccines when they couldn't afford it, and it just helps because we're all human and we all interact with each other. There are other examples of international consortiums like the International Space Station as well, but I think that these kind of models actually can work. Next slide. But this is the key. Patient participation is essential. And we have to do this with patients, which is why we're here at AAKP in the first place. And having the relationship with AAKP and other patient organizations in other countries around the world, European Kidney Patient Federation and others, help us to know where to go, what to do, how to really help. And frankly, it's the right thing to do. And sometimes in our lives, we're all going to be patients. And I think we would all want to be listened to when we're ill. And it's really built on two principles that we've included in KidneyX: to incorporate patient input on the projects before you start to make the widgets, not afterwards, and to recognize patient-driven innovation through a Patient Innovator Prize. We've actually had one contest, one competition through KidneyX that were exclusively developed by patients. And that really proved to show a lot of new things. Next slide, please. And we're starting to see some international cooperation between US and Europe, between the AAKP primarily and EKPF through the EKHA, all these words, EKHA. And in 2021, they had a first meeting between these patient groups to start to talk about it. That's not so long ago. Next slide. And Europe has supported the ideas that we've been developing. They've latched on to the decade of the kidney that AAKP started, and they're now part of it. It's public. They talk about it, and they want to be engaged. Next slide. And in 2022, there was the first face-to-face meeting between the members of European Parliament, co-chairs of the members of European Parliament for Working Group for Kidney Health, and the U.S. Congressional Kidney Caucus, and that was in Brussels, and it's ongoing, and their second meeting is being organized as we speak. Next slide. And so I'll just leave you with this African proverb that, you know, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And in this environment, what we're trying to do is we definitely want to go far. We want to be disruptive, to change what it is that we're doing, and that's never easy. And we don't want to build a better dialysis machine. We want to get away from that and use dialysis as it was initially built, as a temporary device to tie you over from acute renal failure until you can get a transplant. Well, that was the initial thought for maybe 10,000 patients, and that didn't work out so well because it turned into hundreds of thousands of patients. We didn't have enough organs to give to everybody. So that's the future, and that's the vision, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish. So I really thank you for the opportunity to express the thoughts that we're trying to put through, and we need every bit of help we can get. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sheldon, for that exciting presentation. And one thing that I gained from it is something that all of us need, particularly patients, and that's hope. And I think that's something that we don't exactly diagnose, but something that we definitely need. So thank you for that message. Our next speaker is Dr. Fokko Wieringa. He is a principal scientist with the Health Department of IMEC, the Netherlands, and a part-time associate professor of medical technology at the University Medical Utrecht. He has 35 years of experience in medical technology and is the co-inventor of 26 granted patents. Fokko is a core driver of the Dutch Kidney Foundation's Neo-Kidney Initiative to develop a portable artificial kidney and a liaison to the Kidney Health Initiative, a partnership between FDA and the American Society of Nephrology. He is also the 2021 winner of a KidneyX Prize. Fokko is joining us from the Netherlands, so please turn your attention to the screen for his remarks. Fokko, our good friend, go right ahead.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here at the American Association of Kidney Patients Global Summit. And people have asked me to give a lecture about the decade of the kidney and how patient voices can bridge oceans. And believe me, they can. Let's start by disclosing my conflicts of interest, if any. I work at IMEC for 100%, and sometimes they hire me to the Dutch Kidney Foundation, to NeoKidney. I'm a 10% associate professor at the UMC Utrecht, and also the voluntary chair of the European Kidney Health Alliance Workgroup 3 Breakthrough Innovation, which we sure hope that we can do. Also, I represent the Netherlands in IEC and ISO standardization organizations that write the standards for the whole world on dialysis equipment. The world urgently needs drastically better kidney replacement therapies. Of course, we have at the moment transplantation, and it's the best and cheapest option we have so far. But there's a structural shortage of donor organs, and there's this immune suppression drugs that you have to take to prevent rejection. And still, you have up to 25% shorter remaining life expectancy. Sure, there's dialysis, but it's associated with poor quality of life. And it's resource heavy and expensive, up to 80,000 euros or $89,000 per patient per year, depending on the country and method. There's a high mortality risks, at 10 to 100 times higher than in the general population. And the 5-year survival on dialysis is lower than for most cancer treatments. COVID-19 made all this stuff even worse, and we have to remember there's 2/3 of the patients worldwide that actually would need some form of kidney replacement therapy simply don't get it because they live in a country that doesn't offer it. This button summarizes the raw reality for most patients on dialysis. Damned if you do, and dead if you don't. The costs keep rising unsustainably. They have been rising for many years, and they will keep on rising as projected now if we stick to what we have. So we have to do something innovative, something that offers a better quality of life and still at a lower cost. Now look at the graph at the right. We see that by 2030, if we don't do anything, we will have a big increase in the numbers of people that are on some form of kidney replacement therapy, but the increase of people that are not on therapy, although they should need it, is even quicker. Now that's a problem. 1/3 of the patients that are now getting treatment on dialysis say, get me better treatment, and right they are. And the other 2/3, they simply say, please get me some treatment. And this situation is really unsustainable and unacceptable. Let's take a look at the Star Trek vision for the future. And according to that Star Trek vision, we're now in the Dark Ages. You remember maybe the scene where Dr. McCoy from Star Trek says, dialysis, my God, what is this, the Dark Ages? Now swallow that pill and you'll be fine. And the lady says, the doctor gave me a pill and I grew a new kidney. Of course, I know that this is not a reality at the moment and not very soon. Yet it is an interesting vision. And so the question becomes, how can we leave the Dark Ages? Now, the good news is we already have a roadmap, and it's written by the Kidney Health Initiative, the FDA, the American Society for Nephrology, the American Association of Kidney Patients, and Home Dialysis United, and many, many other stakeholders. We have technical or physiochemical ways to make an artificial kidney. We have cellular or biological approaches, and of course we have a hybrid approach where we combine technology and biology. All those three are described in that roadmap. Now there's a near-term, a mid-term, and a long-term vision in the roadmap as well. And as you can see, by 2022, we ended the near-term and entered the mid-term, not to mention the long-term, of course. So where are we now, and how's it going? We recently published an overview article review in Nature Reviews Nephrology with the intention also to use it at this global summit. So we're very happy that the editors of Nature Reviews Nephrology did us the favor and published it right in time for this exciting summit. Now, as you can see, we have several ways that we can look upon it. Dialysis, hemodialysis, as it is now, is depicted in A. Then portable or wearable hemodialysis is in B. Now, we see that we can make that smaller because we regenerate the dialysate, we reuse it again. With that, we use much less volume than we originally would do. If we go to option C, we can even say, let's make an implantable dialysis filter, which would mean no needles needed anymore. The blood would stay in the body, and only things through the skin would be two leads for the dialysate in and the dialysate out. And we could use that same regeneration of dialysate to keep it very small and very handy and portable. Then, of course, the ultimate thing would be to go to D, a truly implantable artificial kidney doing hemodialysis, but keeping all the blood in the body and not needing a dialysate line to the outside. Instead, use a reactor, a bioreactor module, and break all the toxins to the bladder so that you can normally pee again. Now, these seem like science fiction, but believe me, there's at least 2 initiatives that are working on that. I'll come to that later. Now, for peritoneal dialysis, we see, of course, the existing title depicted here in option E, but wearable peritoneal dialysis can also be there when we regenerate that. So the same kind of increased portability can also be done with peritoneal dialysis. Now, there's at least 2 initiatives ongoing at this very moment to come to a biohybrid, so a techno-biohybrid artificial kidney. It's the Kidney Project in the USA, run in San Francisco by Shuva Roy and, of course, Bill Fazell. Great names that have been working on this very meticulously and very thoroughly for the last years, and they have been making impressive progress. In Europe, I must admit, we started later. But we're in KidNew. I'm in the KidNew project in Europe, which also got quite some funding from the European Union. And there we have a kind of a similar approach. So the technologies are slightly different, but the intention is also to connect to the bladder and pee normally again. And that may be interesting. It may even be that a mixture of the 2 projects in the end would bring the quickest results. We don't know. At least I know that we know each other, we respect each other, and we're always open to communicate and see how we can increase the speed. It's merely a matter of where does the financing come from, but I know that the researchers really intend to help each other where they can. Now, no matter whether you're in America or in Europe or even in Japan or any other Western country, see it like this. The biohybrid approach and the techno-biohybrid approach has an interesting chance now, if we look upon it in time overall, because every developed country has a health program. Every developed country has a Green Deal program or something like an eco program, and every developed country that has a CHIPS Act at this very moment. Now, if you look upon the sweet spot where all those 3 kind of funding programs come together, it's interestingly the artificial implantable kidney. And that would mean that several countries, several geographical regions might have their own program started or agreed to cooperate upon certain aspects and get quicker to the target. I am convinced that chip technology anyhow will play a big role in the future of implantable artificial kidneys. I'm not the only one. Bill Fazell and Shuva Roy also think like that, and there's other parties. There's also, of course, the biological approach, the fully biological approach. And this is a marvelous step forward that you see here. Namely, this is a pig kidney connected to a human. The kidney is still outside the human. It was a temporal connection, but look upon the miracle that Dr. Montgomery created in New York when he had a genetically modified pig's kidney, a so-called xenotransplant, connected to a unfortunately brain dead person. The person was already brain dead, and there was family was okay that this experiment was done, and it produced urine. It was not rejected. Believe me, normally if you would connect a pig's kidney to a human being within an hour, the kidney is black. It will be heavily rejected because it's a foreign body. But when you have this genetically modified approach, the kidney is not immediately rejected and it produces urine. It's a breakthrough. Yes, there's many steps to do also in the biological approach, but at least there's several horses in the race, which I think is good news. And I think all these horses, they deserve to be encouraged. Where we see, how do artificial organ society fit into the picture? Well, let me start with the decade of the kidney, how it started. Patient voices can bridge oceans. The AAKP started the decade of the kidney, and they helped to create that roadmap, the technology roadmap. KidneyU also helped on creating that. Now, in the US, we had a stakeholders roundtable, as you see depicted here, with different stakeholders, including, of course, the patient centrally. They were all gathered around that round table. Interestingly enough, and I did not make these graphics, they were taken from the American side and the European side. But in Europe, we also have a roundtable model. Independently, we also have a similar roundtable model with all the stakeholders connected around it, including, of course, the driving force, the Patient Federation in Europe. Now, look upon that similarity. We go on with similarities when we see that the US Congressional Kidney Caucus, where your political leaders are gathering, has an interest club called the Kidney Caucus for Kidney Health. And they got the money, and they got the government so far that they brought the money for the KidneyX prize competition, which is very exciting, as we know. Now in Europe, we have a similar members of European Parliament group for kidney health. Those politicians are striving for the same goal from the other side of the Atlantic. And again, we see a mirror similarity. And there's even more. It sounds like Telcel, but there's even more. Namely, we have also an international, already existing structure of federations and societies for artificial organs. The ASIO, which is depicted to the right underneath the roadmap, that is the American Society for Artificial Internal Organs. But we also have an ESAO, the European Society for Artificial Organs. There's a Japanese one, there's an Asian Pacific one, and they all are overarched under the mother organization of the International Federation for Artificial Organs. Isn't that wonderful? So what we need to build here is a consortium, an international consortium, to combine the best brains to build better treatments with patients and with doctors and nurses and with policymakers and with investors and, of course, inventors. We need engineers and we need entrepreneurs, people that get how commercialization works and how you build firms, to all unify in the decade of the kidney, with the Americans and the Europeans all coming together. And that's not all. What we also need is a better, solid funding program that facilitates international cooperation. And therefore, we need a kind of a bridge between at least America and Europe. And maybe if you look upon this cartoon, you'll laugh and smile and say, ha, yeah, that's funny, of course. It's easy to draw a cartoon. And I can say it also works with dollars. It's an interesting scientific discovery. But hey, it's just a cartoon. Now, the interesting thing is that Professor Andrew Lowe, who is a professor of financial engineering at MIT, and that's not nothing. MIT is the Walhalla for the technician, for the nerds, for the future vision, for the Star Trek vision people. And he has been talking at ASIO about financial engineering to make such a solid funding program really true. And believe me, this guy is a world expert on how to build funding programs for medtech research. Now, basically, that's all I wanted to tell for this moment, folks. So if anybody wants to reach me, my contact details are shown here. I just got one big wish, and that is let's combine the individual puzzle pieces that we have in the decade of the kidney to really make it come true that somehow we get an artificial implantable kidney before the end of this decade. And I think that AAKP's Decade of the Kidney, which is joined by the European Kidney Health Association and the European Kidney Patient Federation, is a wonderful vehicle to come to that point. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Fokko, for a fascinating, as usual, fascinating presentation. I'm now happy to introduce another great friend and ally to AAKP, a strong patient advocate and a dear friend, Dr. Jonathan Himmelfarb. Dr. Himmelfarb is director of the Kidney Research Institute, professor of medicine and adjunct professor of bioengineering. He also holds the Dr. Joseph Eschbach Endowed Chair in Kidney Research at the University of Washington. His current research interests include developing a wearable artificial kidney, development of a human kidney on a chip, development and evaluation of risk biomarkers in acute and chronic kidney disease, and studies of kidney precision medicine. We are excited to have him join us from Washington State. Take it away, Dr. Himmelfarb.
I'd like to thank Richard Knight for moderating this session, and I'd like to particularly thank the AAKP and George Washington University for sponsoring this global summit on innovation in kidney disease. Today, I'll talk about pathways to artificial implantable organs and describe the growing global momentum to make this happen. This is something patients have waited for a long time. And I'm going to start at the very beginning because the kind of innovation that took place at the beginnings of dialysis is the kind of spirit that we need to move this entire field forward towards implantable, wearable artificial kidneys now in the 21st century. So Willem Kool, for those who have not heard of him, was an amazing pioneer and inventor who, while a physician and a refugee from the Nazis during World War II, working in the Netherlands as a physician, was really disturbed when his patients were dying of kidney failure and he couldn't do anything about it. So in his basement at night, he was busy trying to build dialysis machines for the first time. And it was in the middle of the war, and he was incredibly innovative. He used artificial sausage skin as a dialysis membrane. He used washing machines, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner of this slide, to make his dialysis device. For metal, he was using scrap metal from airplanes downed in the fields. So he would go out at night and scrap the metal to build his dialysis machines, and he was treating patients during the war and was the first person ever to dialyze someone who then survived because of that dialysis treatment. And this is the only experiment that he did back then where he described removal of urea and other uremic toxins from the blood side to the dialysate side on the artificial sausage skin. So this was the beginnings of dialysis in the 1940s. And Belding Scribner, another pioneer, and both doctors Kolff and Scribner ended up sharing the Lasker Award, which is the most prestigious medical award other than the Nobel Prize, for really having created dialysis as a treatment for irreversible kidney failure. And back in the 1960s, Dr. Scribner, who is a professor at the University of Washington, said, if the treatment of chronic uremia cannot fully rehabilitate the patient, the treatment is inadequate. So what he was saying is that for dialysis to be considered an adequate treatment, patients have to feel well, be fully rehabilitated, and live the life that they were meant to live. And Dr. Kolff, who continued to be a pioneer well into his 90s and eventually moved to the United States and worked at the University of Utah and the Cleveland Clinic, set a goal of trying to make dialysis portable, because he understood way back when that for patients to really live the life they were meant to live, they have to be able to have freedom to travel and freedom to do the things that they want to do with their life. So this pioneer back in the 1970s was working on creating wearable forms of dialysis, and he actually took patients rafting down the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon with this portable dialysis device. But he could never solve the problem of the dialysate and the volumes of water it takes to make dialysate and the weight of that dialysate, which prevented truly portable dialysis back in the 1970s. If we fast forward 40 years later, Bill Peckham, who was really an iconic dialysis patient, really an amazing human being who lived here in Seattle and I got to know very well, who unfortunately died in 2019, took a rafting trip down the Grand Canyon with his next stage home dialysis machine on the raft. And Bill Peckham dialyzed himself at home for 28 years. He dialyzed in about 30 different countries around the world. Way before it was popular, he started a blog for patients called From the Sharp End of the Needle about being on dialysis. He was involved in public policy and congressional policy. He was also the first patient to become the chairman of the board of trustees of the Northwest Kidney Centers, a not-for-profit dialysis provider here in Seattle. He was an amazing human being, and Bill used to say that we as patients don't live to dialyze, but we dialyze to live, and we want to be able to live the life that we were meant to live. And so rafting down the Grand Canyon epitomizes what life should be like for patients with kidney failure. But this trip took months of very meticulous planning. There was a doctor and a nurse present, and supplies still had to be airlifted in. So 40 years later, we still hadn't made the kind of progress that Willem Kolff would have hoped that we had made, and Belding Scribner would have hoped that we had made, to really fully rehabilitate the lives of people living with kidney failure that are receiving dialysis treatment. So here at the Center for Dialysis Innovation at the University of Washington, we believe that patients need to be at the table, who have a lived experience of being on dialysis, to help design the next generation of dialysis therapies and treatments and machines. And so we listen. Not only do we listen to our patient advisory board, but our patient advisors are basically embedded in with our engineering teams that are designing new types of portable and wearable dialysis devices. And I'm so grateful for the AAKP for their leadership over time in really advancing the idea that patients have to be at the table and patients have to have agency in designing the next generation of dialysis treatments. And you may notice that several of the members of our patient advisory board are former leaders of the AAKP. So the pathway forward for novel and innovative therapies for kidney failure has been now well described through the Kidney Health Initiative, which really has created a roadmap, a landscape publication that gives us a roadmap for what needs to be accomplished to make new types of therapies, whether they be wearable, portable, or ultimately implantable. And basically, we need to be able to replace the myriad functions of healthy human kidneys, which are really quite amazing organs in all the different things that they do to maintain the entire human body in a state of health. So we have to be able to replicate blood filtration, maintain the electrolytes like sodium and potassium in balance. We have to be able to regulate fluid so that the input every day of fluid is equal to the output and fluid doesn't accumulate in the body. We have to be able to remove all the toxins that normally are eliminated by the kidney. And we have to have a mechanism for these fluids that contain all the toxins and allow us to balance the blood to be eliminated from the body. So that fluid has to be transported and drained out of the body. So these are formidable tasks, and our next generation of renal replacement therapies has to be able to accomplish these 5 tasks. And the pathway has also been articulated in this framework from this roadmap that was produced by the Kidney Health Initiative for generations of new therapies. And they go from left to right here, really towards blue sky, best possible outcomes. So first on the left is enhancing the value of current dialysis for patients by making it a better treatment, by improving existing dialysis therapy. Then we hope to be able to miniaturize dialysis treatments to be portable and wearable and give patients that kind of freedom so that any patient could raft down the Grand Canyon as Bill Peckham did. And then ultimately move to biohybrid implantable kidneys where you wouldn't need to be connected to an external device. It would all be internalized in the body. And then ultimately one day with stem cell biology and regenerative medicine, perhaps we'll be able to grow new kidneys. But we do recognize that all of these efforts are going to take time and considerable effort, and it takes an entire village of innovators and patients and regulators, all to move this forward to benefit our patients. This publication just came out a couple of weeks ago in a prestigious journal, Nature Reviews Nephrology, and it outlines all these different configurations that innovators around the world are now working on to improve the kinds of treatments that we can offer to our patients. So again, kind of going from left to right, we move from portable and wearable dialysis towards implantable dialysis configurations to implantable complete artificial kidneys. So the good news is that many different groups around the world are now working with different ideas, different hypotheses or structures that they're trying to build, but they're really trying to think outside the box and be innovative and be able to offer patients something different than we're able to offer them today. We have been working on a portable and wearable form of dialysis, and for this, here are our tasks. We realize that we need to be able to remove urea, that the vascular access will have to be improved, and that we're going to have much more monitoring to ensure patient safety. And fortunately, new kinds of monitors and sensors are being developed that can be used for these purposes. And of course, patients have to be at the table as these devices are designed so that the ergonomics are right and the patients will want to use these devices going forward. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you see what we and many other groups around the world are doing now, which is to try to use lots of different ideas for how we can eliminate toxins and accomplish all those 5 goals that would replace what the kidney does for function. So there's not one solution that is obvious, but there are many possible solutions. And there are many different groups around the world now that are working on those solutions. So I'd like to finish by saying that I want us all of us innovators, all patients, also to be patient, because all of these solutions are going to take time. And I know that our patients and our caregivers and our families all want this tomorrow. We've been waiting for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years for these kinds of innovations to take place. Now I think as never before, there is this global momentum to make this happen, but it's not going to happen overnight. And there's no one group that's working on these innovations now that with 100% assurance can tell us, well, the path we're on is definitely going to work. So this is a quote from Yogi Berra, who said, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So I want to avoid what's sometimes called the hope hype cycle, where patients get too excited too fast that this is all going to happen around the corner a few months from now or even a year or two from now, and that we'll be able to offer patients much better treatments than we have today. We are working on it. Many other groups are working on it. And we hope that we will be successful, but it will take time for this to happen. And I'll end with a quote from Dennis Gabor, who won the Nobel Prize in 1970 for inventing the hologram. And that is, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So all of us have to work together. We have to work to eliminate the barriers, whether they be financial barriers for the innovators, regulatory barriers as well for these devices that people are working on, so that we can get these next generation devices to patients as soon as is possible. So I want to once again thank the AAKP and George Washington University for their amazing efforts. This is the 5th Global Summit on Innovation. This has become the go-to meeting to really hear what's happening around the world and to push momentum forward for this to happen so that we can finally have more to offer our patients than we have to offer today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Himmelfarb. As usual, you did not disappoint. Thank you for a great presentation. Our next speaker is joining us all the way from Africa. Job Kasweshi is the first kidney transplant recipient from Zambia. He and his brother, Tanisha, underwent kidney donor recipient transplant surgery in October of 2018. Not only is he a patient, but also an assistant clinical care specialist and kidney transplant coordinator for the Ministry of Health. This is a perfect example of kidney patient taking their personal skills and patient experience to a remarkable position of influence. Job joins us from Zambia to speak to the importance of increasing transplantation and what a device such as an artificial kidney would mean to fellow patients in his country. Job, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, Richard. Thank you. Richard, thank you. AAKP, thank you. George Washington University for giving me the opportunity to share my story and as well as sharing what I have to share today. So I'm going to be talking about the importance of patient engagement for people living with chronic kidney disease and the need to increase innovations like artificial organs. So I'm going to be talking about the advantages of artificial organs and why we need them today. So allow me to share a little bit about my story and what I went through when I battled with kidney failure. So in the year 2012, when I was in Ukraine, after doing my medical degree, I got sick and was diagnosed with kidney failure. It was a terrible, terrible experience because I was very, very far from home, and I didn't have my family around. So you know how it can be when you're not with family near you, and then you get sick. So lucky enough, the doctors and nurses that attended to me in Ukraine were very, very professional, and I'm grateful to them that they did their job to save my life. I don't know where I would have been if it wasn't for them. So 2012 again, that's the year I was diagnosed, and I was actually going into my last year, looking forward to get back home and see my loved ones, and that's when I suffered from kidney failure. So I was I got stable to a point where I was a chronic patient that didn't need dialysis. So 2015, when I graduated, I got back home, and a year after I started working. So 2017, when I was working at the hospital where I was working, my condition became worse, and I needed dialysis services again. And that meant being referred to a center that had dialysis services. So when I went there, I thank God that the doctors and nurses did their best to have me treated, and I was okay, stable. So in my country then, we were not doing kidney transplants. So most of the times the government would send patients to India for transplants, either kidney or any other organ related transplant, and which was very, very costly for the government, and not everyone had an opportunity to get evacuated, because there was actually a very, very long list. So I think patients that are on dialysis, or patients that are on the waiting list, can understand the struggle that comes with waiting when you don't know when your opportunity will come. So 2018, I think the beginning of 2018, my doctors told me I had reached end-stage kidney disease, and that they told me that I needed to look for a donor and think of kidney transplant. So I went back home and I told my parents, I told my brother and my sister about it. And so my dad was the first person to react. He told me, okay, he asked me, what do I need to be a donor? So when I looked at him, I knew he wasn't fit to donate because of his age. So the mortality rate for Africans is quite low. So 59 going up. When you're 59 and going up, you're not allowed to donate either a kidney or whatever organ, because we don't want to solve a problem and create another problem. So when Dad asked me if he was fit to give me a kidney, I was grateful for the thought, but when I looked at him, I knew he wasn't capable, or he wasn't able to give me a kidney. So my brother then, who is a lawyer, came in and told me that he was willing to give me a kidney, and it was hard for me to accept that, because at the time he told me that he's a lawyer by profession, so he was preparing for his bar exams, and bar exams in Zambia are one of the toughest exams one can ever face. So I was thinking, should I allow him to 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 go through pain and just go through pain and just disturb his exams? So, but he didn't mind. He told me that he was going to do his best to see that my life was back again. So we started we went to see our doctor, and we started our test. And fortunate enough, he was a suitable donor. We had the same blood group, and everything was compatible. So when they were preparing us for this kidney transplant, of course the doctors were very excited, because this was going to be the first kidney transplant to be conducted locally in my country. So So the president then gave a directive that the transplant should be conducted on our Independence Day, on the country's Independence Day celebration. So that's what happened. So 24th October 2018, at the time when our country was celebrating its independence, people didn't know that transplant was taking off, or a transplant was being conducted at the biggest teaching hospital, which is the University Teaching Hospital, University Teaching Hospital. So after the transplant was conducted, night then, I think it was the Minister of Health then, he gave an address to the nation and informed them that he had conducted a kidney operation. So, of course, I think a day after two, I had improved and I started passing urine again, which I was very, very happy about, and happy that my life was back to normal. So I just thought I could share my story. Allow me to talk about the importance of organ donations and why we need them, especially in an era where it's not easy to find a donor. I come from a country where organ donation is still new. People are still learning about organ donation. And, you know, when someone doesn't have the information, it makes it hard for them to make a right decision. Like in this case, if people are not educated about like in where I come from, organ donation, like I said, it's still new. So what happens in my country is most people that donate are mostly family and close relatives. So if a patient that is on dialysis is informed to look for a donor, if they can't get a donor from the family, it's very, very hard to get a donor. I think that's why innovations like artificial organs are important, because that actually will give an opportunity for anyone to have their transplant and live a normal life again. Of course, if when these devices are ready, if they'll be accessible, if they'll be cheap for everyone to access, despite the background of the patient, despite the race and country where the patient is from. If these artificial organs are made accessible and available and affordable to people, I think it is a move that everyone will welcome. And I think it's also a move that will improve and save a lot of lives. So artificial organs will improve lives, because then patients will not be depend on humans to donate, or rather friends, relatives to donate, but it will give an option to such patients to look at artificial donation. So, and this I think will save a lot of lives and will reduce the waiting list, not just in my country, but I believe it will do that globally for renal patients. So it's a move that is welcomed, and it's a move that will bring hope to a lot of patients. And therefore, I really, really commend the companies and the researchers that are working towards uh, such devices. I'm grateful for the opportunity again, and I pray that I pray that we get to a time when 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 everyone will have an opportunity to get an organ, be it artificial um, or human organ. And I think what is important is that everyone receives a chance to a normal life. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, AAKP. Thank you, Washington University.
Joe, we really thank you for the incredible work that you're doing to educate people about organ donation process in your country. Now, our final presenter is Zachary Cahill. Zach serves as a senior artificial kidney product specialist for the American Society of Nephrology and is a true expert in what it takes to coordinate the kidney community and broader biotech industry to pursue the commercialization of an artificial kidney. He is here today to tie all of this together, tie all the presentations together you heard from our earlier panelists on taking the concept and the need of an artificial kidney to reality by working with industry to better incorporate the principles of human-centered design and patient insights. Zach has written a tremendous article on this issue for the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology and has been very involved in the development of the technology roadmap for renal replacement therapy. Zach, I'd like to welcome you to the podium here and personally thank you for all the work that you're doing in this area.
Hey everyone. Do I have a clicker or do I have to? Great. Okay, so I'm supposed to wrap everything up here. I know I've been sitting for a long time. So where we started with Murray and with Fokko really gave a good overview of where we've been, and I know Jonathan talked about avoiding the hope and hype cycle. So I've been given license by Paul to be the pragmatic closing to this, and we're going to think at a really high level about what it actually takes to get products to market. Because I know we've talked a lot about exciting things that are going on, but it takes a lot more than really cool science to actually deliver products that change people's lives. So a couple of things I'm going to talk about today. One idea is the total product system, and that is kind of the wraparound of services and institutions and people that we need to actually encourage adoption and sustained use of a product. The other thing we're going to talk a lot about is this idea of user needs or requirements, and both of those work together so that we can ensure that the products that we end up making, these artificial kidneys, actually work for the lives and context of the people that we want to serve. So one way to kind of visualize this is just think about what we are asking people to do in the context of home dialysis. And when we're coming from a context where we're used to doing everything in a clinic and everything in like a safe hospital environment and then taking it to the home, we really see what it looks like to have a technology push approach to innovation. And we can see the limits of not incorporating the whole life and context of your end user. The most important end user is the patient, but for many products that we've heard about today and that we'll hear about this weekend, there are lots of other really important stakeholders who have requirements that need to be incorporated into a product's design. So Richard gave me all the credit for that CJSON paper, but I wrote that with Paul. And really the idea we're trying to explore was we just found it really surprising how many people start home dialysis and end up returning to the center. We've seen there's a couple of different numbers out there. One that we could cite was 30%, but I've seen 40% as well, which was really surprising to us because home dialysis is pitched as such a really good therapy to improve both clinical outcomes and quality of life. So we asked, like, why is this great therapy not retaining the people who could benefit from it? And we started exploring this idea of what if home dialysis machines incorporated more of the life and context of real people with kidney failure into their design. Would that help more people stay on home hemodialysis? And that kind of brings up an idea that Richard mentioned that has really kind of shaped how we are thinking about innovation at the American Society of Nephrology, which is human-centered design, or broadly user-centered design. And that is that we should start our innovation process by really understanding what problems we're solving, and then build a product to actually address that problem, rather than building a product and going and finding a problem to solve. So we've had some really good surveys of what the landscape looks like from Fokko and Burry and Jonathan earlier, so I won't repeat any of that. I think when we think about requirements and what actually takes for a person to actually use a product, we found it helpful to think about artificial kidneys in terms of whether or not they're dialysis-like or more kidney-like. And I think this is relevant when you think about the support structure we have to build around a product. If you think of something that is a wearable or a portable dialysis machine, this is something that probably revolves around an outpatient clinic. We have to have techs or some sort of support to provide maintenance to that product. We have to have consumables that a patient has to buy from somewhere. You can kind of see what sort of institution or organization a product like wearable or portable dialysis or artificial kidney would revolve around. Something that's more kidney-like is something that's probably implanted, and it might revolve a lot more around a hospital setting. This is a lot more of a high-risk procedure, and it's probably done by a surgeon. The reason we game this out is because there's a lot of people that have to be paid for one of these products to actually get to the people that need it. We have to be able to think about all of those different stakeholders' requirements for a product to actually be used. Something might be really helpful for a patient, but if it hasn't actually incorporated the needs of like the physician or the surgeon, they are probably not going to end up using it. So we have to really think holistically about all the different people that are involved in actually bringing a product to market. This also helps us identify at the ASN where we can help de-risk the process. So again, we've talked about all of these different types of artificial kidneys already, but a couple things to think about that we haven't mentioned yet. How long do each of these products need to work? And how are we coming up with that figure? That has a lot of implications when we think about the regulatory path and some reimbursement strategies for these different products. We need lots of shots on goal, so we've talked about that a lot. It's really difficult to bring a product to market, and we need each of these different pathways to reach maturity. Another way to think about where we're at, and Jonathan talked about difficulty predicting the future, is think about the product development cycle as people with ideas, people who are trying ideas, and people who have products. So when you think about how far away many of these are, and we had some timelines on the previous slide, we're mostly talking about people with ideas and people who are trying ideas. We need to have a lot more people who are actually building products and who are out testing those products. So Jonathan represents a group that's doing a really good job, and we need more people and organizations like Kuleana who are putting shots on goal for people with kidney failure. We're a long way from having a dozen artificial kidneys running in a room continuously and waiting for them to fail. But we're moving in the right direction on that. The other thing to think about with each of these, that also gets into these dialysis-like and kidney-like area. Murray talked earlier about how there's a very, like 72% of people in the poll he cited wants something like an artificial kidney. It's probably higher than that. I know that survey was old. We need to start getting specific with that. What products are specific people going to use, and for what purpose? I think if we ask somebody sitting in a dialysis chair if they don't want to sit in a dialysis chair, they're going to say yes. It was surprising to me when we were working on our human-centered design toolkit. I was talking to someone who was a pediatric patient who did a PD cycler overnight, and he said he wouldn't want to have a wearable artificial kidney that he'd have to take to school, that could get disconnected when he was playing. He liked a lot better the idea that he could just go home, dialyze at night, no one had to know, and all his days were normal like everybody else. So I think we really need to get specific about what sort of person we're talking about and what sort of product works for them. So we talked about requirements, thinking about all the different users that use a product. First, this is not just a nice to have. This is part of how the FDA reviews devices and how it thinks about design control. So the thing we do a lot of talking about science and technology at these meetings, which is really important. And we probably need to spend a little bit more time thinking about that validation process. Have we built the right product to solve the right problem? We do really good at showing that the product works, and there's a lot of really good science going on. But again, going back to what specific people we're trying to serve, we should probably spend a little bit more time thinking about are we building the right product in the first place? An idea that gets into this is something we often, a litmus test, as when I'm talking to developers, is whether or not they've achieved design lock yet. And that's just a way to try to figure out, have you collected all of your requirements, and have you stopped modifying your prototype, and can you actually test it? Because every time you go back and you change something in a device, as everyone who's built something knows, everything is interconnected. And one really good way to try to figure out if a product is ready for a clinical trial is if they actually have a prototype that is ready to kind of go into verification and validation process or even clinical trials. One thing I wanted to point out on this slide is the burdens that are added or taken away. So I think it's been pretty well documented what the burdens of dialysis are and being in the center. But every product that is going to come out is going to ask something of patients. And we want to be honest with patients about what we're asking them to do, because that factors into their decision on whether or not to start a new therapy. So this is how we think about innovation at the ASN. And we spend a lot of time at these meetings, at ASN, at other meetings, on that middle section. We need to get the science right, and it's important to make sure that the science and technology is moving in the right direction. But it's probably worth as much time making sure we're solving the right problem and being really specific about the kind of people we want to serve. It's also going to be really important if we think about actually getting products into the hands of patients, though we spend a lot of time on that implementation side. We need a lot more people who understand how to commercialize products involved in the kidney disease space to come alongside the scientists and engineers and help them understand how they actually get their products to patients. The other thing here on needs, since we are at a patient, this is a patient meeting, just to think about what problems are we trying to solve. And I was struck by Kevin Longino, the CEO of the National Kidney Fund, spoke at a KidneyX meeting we had a couple weeks ago. He said something he doesn't hear people talk enough about is just that most people just want to get back to work, and just how low of a bar that is compared to what we sometimes try to make artificial kidneys come out to be. And we could do a lot of good if we just created a product that would just allow people to get back into the workforce. So this is the last slide I'll talk about. And this is a tool we developed to really help people implement this idea of human-centered design. So we provide 3 things for people who are developing artificial kidneys or alternatives to conventional dialysis. First, we spend a lot of time thinking about personas that represent the spectrum of people who have kidney failure. And our challenge is for innovators to think about how does their products change a specific kind of person's life. The second thing we provided is metrics and problem statements that we discovered through research to help people measure how well they're solving problems. And lastly, we thought about an innovation scale, a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because we often have trouble thinking about what is incremental and what is transformative, and also what do patients actually need. So we developed this innovation scale to be able to help people target a specific need area for their product to serve. So that's all I have for now. I just want to encourage patients that are watching this that you do have a real big voice in the product development cycle, and I would encourage you to press innovators who interact with you to explain how their product is going to work in your life, and also to encourage them to bring you into the process at the beginning. Don't let them get away with just having you react to a product that's already been made. Push to be involved in the entire process. Also, since we're at GW, any physicians or docs that came in today, get to know what's out there. All the presentations that Fokko and Murray and Jonathan did, understand what's coming down the road so you can get excited about it and communicate that to your patients. Because an important piece of this puzzle is that we help the nephrology community get to know the innovations that are coming so that they can tell their patients about it, so we can help make sure that they actually get into the hands of the people who need them. So thank you.
Thank you, Zach. That was a very exciting and inspiring session about the future of kidney care. You really brought it all together. So you're a longtime champion for patients in AAKP. We consider you a strong ally because there's one thing to have the concepts, which you actually talk about, significant implementation. And finally, again, I started out with, if not us, who? If not now, when? So I think that's a very important concept for us to keep in mind, the immediacy of now. So thank you again to our session speakers. This was an excellent and robust session.